know the why human trafficking work is needed? To fight for the freedom of modern-day slaves. But love, passion, commitment isn't all you need to be an effective and successful anti-trafficking advocate. Learn the how. I'm Dr. Celia Williamson, Director of the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute at the University of Toledo. Welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast, where I'll provide you with the latest and best methods, policy, and practice discussed by experienced experts in the field so that you can cut through the noise, save time, and be about the work of saving lives. Welcome back, Lisa.
Happy to be here. So what's up this week?
Well, I put some finishing touches on my case management course. Thanks for asking, because I always want to talk about that. My effective case management with human trafficking survivors course is going to start March 1st. And I think I'm going to run a beta version at a cheaper rate with just a few people in it, because I want to learn from them as well as them taking the course and learning to increase their skills and their knowledge. I want to be asking them questions about what they think about the layout and, how we form the questions at the end of each chapter and things like that. So,
well, what do you have left to do? I thought you did everything.
Well, I had to check in with some friends. So, some people that know a lot more about specific things than I do. So, I spent time talking to my friend, Sarah Ladd in Minnesota. She's amazing. She's brilliant and all the things. And, I've just been trying to recruit her to do some things with us for a long time. And so look out, Minnesota, because, I'm trying to steal her away and a couple of other people if I can.
Well, isn't that what we've always done at the Institute? Don't we have a reputation for stealing the best?
Indeed, we do. We certainly try. Man, there has been so many awesome podcast guests and just people that I would just love to steal and, but I can't afford them. But, if I had the time to just hang out with a lot of the people, a lot of the podcast guests and people I know, all across the country, around the world, at the state level, just some amazing people. And sometimes when I hear their stories on the podcast, I want to quit what I'm doing and I want to go help them do what they're doing.
Oh, definitely. The stories are so compelling. Speaking of that, so how's the Redwood thing going?
Oh, love the Redwood United class. I'm doing that, and if you missed that, go back and listen, because the guy that runs Redwood United, we do a podcast together. But so for people that don't know, he teaches nonprofits and people who have for-profits to be successful personally as well as professionally. So there's 7 roots that you focus on. And in a redwood tree, there are lots of roots. And so it's all symbolic and it makes a lot of sense. And I've only been in there a couple of weeks. And what I really learned is out of 7 roots, I probably have about 2 roots. So it's my 2 roots are work and hard work. So my tree is not balanced and it's going to topple over. So I'm trying to get some balance in my life and I'm learning. And so it's an amazing course, though. I'm really enjoying it, though.
Okay. So who do we have up this week? You want to tease it a little?
Yeah, I do, because we have a phenomenal person. Her name is Amy Joy, and she's a survivor. She's also a PhD student, and she also has her own company, and she works in the area of human trafficking, educating people. And she also happens to have dissociative identity disorder.
And that's multiple personality disorder, right?
Yeah, but we don't call it that anymore because of the stigma that's associated with multiple personality disorder and all the misunderstandings and all the movies and stuff that got it basically wrong. So it develops because of either continued trauma or some studies that say extreme trauma. And so they now call it DID. And I'm really happy to bring this because I think working particularly with a lot of human trafficking survivors, we need to know about what this is. And, the advocates need to know what it is, and we need to learn about it, reduce the stigma around it. So it's very fitting to have this expert, Amy Joy, talking about this issue. So
Yeah, and I didn't really know much about DID.
yeah, me either. Yeah. So we're going to learn a lot from her. So without further ado, my interview with Amy Joy. Welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast. Today I have Amy Joy, and she is the CEO of Human Trafficking Education Seminars. So we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about that, her seminars and human trafficking. And then she's also getting her PhD in dissociative identity disorder. So we want to teach all of you about how to just learn enough about it to where you might suspect you have a client that might be suffering from this disorder so that you can get them in front of someone who can do a full evaluation, full screening, and then help them get on their path to recovery. Amy Joy is a survivor who is now thriving and giving back across the United States, and also getting her PhD. And check this out, also teaching at Lansing Community College. She's teaching a human trafficking course. So this woman is everywhere. And I'm so glad that we have had enough time today. She's given us enough time today so that she can educate us on her human trafficking seminars and on this particular type of disorder. So welcome, Amy. I'm so glad that you could be here.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much. I mean, this is like so much fun.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I can't believe. So tell me about how you became the CEO of something called Human Trafficking Education Seminars.
Sure. So about 10 years ago, I attended a women's retreat and really had no idea about human trafficking, but the entire weekend was themed around human trafficking. I just, I went up there to get away from my kids for a weekend. Awesome. So I was like, oh, whatever, So I got up there and the main speaker, the missionary, was talking about human trafficking, and she was talking my life. I just had no idea that there were laws surrounding this kind of thing. I really didn't know human trafficking was what it was, and especially here in the US. So that weekend changed everything. I sort of had this undying passion to do something. I just didn't know what. So I ended up talking to a bunch of friends. We opened up a nonprofit, and the goal was to open up a home for girls. And, in the process, we became this education piece. And we did help quite a few adult victims along the way, or survivors along the way. And learned a lot from that. But the education piece really stuck. So the Human Trafficking Education Seminars came about 4 years ago to train, any group that was wanting, education on this, whether it was healthcare or, our education professionals or lodging establishments. So we filled in a gap that just wasn't here in Michigan when the mandate for healthcare professionals came out. So we really saw ourselves just step into the need. And it's really just become a passion. I don't know what it is about teaching, but it just takes me to a whole nother place. So I'm like, I just feel like I'm meant to be here, working in this field and teaching. So.
Well, I think you've experienced a lot. You've lived it. You have the authenticity. And, when something speaks to your soul, it speaks to your soul. And it tells you very clearly in some people what you should be doing.
Yes.
And, a lot of people I've experienced myself have tried a couple of different things and didn't really gain a lot of traction. And then when you hit the nail on the head and you get to the thing that your soul is telling you should be doing, that's when you're on fire and you make it work. So tell us, who have you been educating? Have you been across cities? Have you been across states educating people?
Yeah, so we have been everywhere. I haven't been to the West Coast yet, but we've been up and down the East Coast, Alabama, Florida, even over to Nebraska and Missouri. So, we've been in Ohio and Indiana. So we've been just everywhere. It's pretty much been word of mouth across the national spots.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Michigan, we do advertise a little bit more, but locally people know that this is what we do. So, so we don't really market a whole lot. We just word of mouth. Hey, she was here. So,
Yeah.
but
And
yeah,
so
it's been everywhere.
how do people get in touch with you if they want to have a seminar?
Yeah. So we've got, the website is humantraffickingeducationseminars.com.
That's easy enough.
It's
Yeah.
easy enough. Yeah. So,
And
yeah,
so
my email is just, amyjoypresents@gmail. So it's
that's
very simple.
awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you educate a certain population of people or anybody who asks you? And how do you change? I mean, do you have prepackaged seminars, or how do you go about that process?
Yeah, so it was an evolutionary process. We started with the basics and community groups and churches. And then because of my mental health background, so I've got, social work degree and then a business degree and now psychology. So I really honed in on mental health. So a lot of our clients were mental health professionals, but also here in Michigan, because of the healthcare mandate, we've had to, depending on who's listening, right? So our nurses are going to get a little bit different education than our mental health. So we do design it based on the audience. We throw in the disorders and things like that make sense to the mental health professionals. And we throw in more of the red flags and the emergency situations for nurses. And of course, when it comes to like hotels and motels, that's a totally different sector. So we modify things to make sure that we're addressing issues specific to the audience we're talking to, even to law enforcement. So, we've trained probation officers on what to look for, but that's a different presentation. We do have packaged presentations mostly for mental health professionals and the lodging establishment folks down in Florida. So there's a package on our website that they can purchase for like $249. It's got the USB, all the training stuff, all the materials and all that in my book. And so it's easy. They can just train themselves once they get all the material. But most of what I do now, because of the whole COVID thing, is via Zoom. So,
Well, I'm sure that's why you're successful, because you start with the base, like cooking. You start with the base, and then you're adding the different flavor that speaks particularly to the particular audience, which I think is way better than just the Human Trafficking 101.
Right.
So, what is this book you mentioned?
It's actually called Human Trafficking 101.
All right. Is it? No way. Is it? That is awesome.
But I wrote a book. It came out in 2018. I'm
looking at this book and it says Human Trafficking 101. So
Yep.
They will have to call you if they want more than that, but they can get the general overview right there. So how many ways can you offer it? You have it in writing? You'll come there personally?
It's ebook and you can get paperback. It's on Amazon. It's super cheap, but it actually includes a lot of the mental health stuff. It includes a lot of the different sectors that we teach to, but in a very brief kind of way. So it's a quick read. It's very clear. It's appropriate for like ages 12 and up. So it's not going to get all nitty gritty. But it's a really good place to start for people who don't quite understand, or they just need a desk reference. Hey, is this what I'm looking at? And they can look up some resources. So it was just something I felt that was needed so we can touch on each different area and get the basics out there. So, yeah.
And they can pick that up on Amazon?
Amazon. Yep. It's Human Trafficking 101 Story, Stats, and Solutions. And it's published under Amy Joy.
I love that, because much like we do this podcast, people want the information. They want it quickly. They don't want a bunch of flowery stuff. Just give me the information because I'm busy and I need to move on. So I think that's a great idea. Reading the book and then calling you if they want any specific detailed information and presentation. So you're also getting your PhD in dissociative identity disorder. You're specializing in that. And that has me very curious. What is dissociative identity disorder, first of all?
Well, it was traditionally called multiple personality disorder. So it's been relabeled in the last DSM-5 to just sort of get rid of the negative stigma that came along with that. But pretty much what it is, dissociation exists on a spectrum from, I'm daydreaming, what we call highway dissociation. I missed my exit because I was off swimming somewhere in Hawaii in my head. Mm-hmm. So we all do that. But for those who've been through trauma, they go through a series of dissociative episodes. And especially if you hear victims talk about, or, survivors talk about, I saw it happening to me from across the room, or I watched it happen to me. I was like floating on the ceiling. That's something we call depersonalization. So it's the process of the actual mind is separated from the physical body. And it's a mechanism that's just built into every human to protect the whole person from the traumatic event, so that tomorrow I can wake up and not be a complete mess. So mm-hmm. Tomorrow I can wake up and go to school or take care of my kids or do whatever I need to do without living in the trauma. So dissociative identity disorder comes about during traumatic events. And generally what we attach that to is that depersonalization process. Those events sort of get trapped in our implicit or unconscious parts of our brain. And because trauma is occurring, parts of our brain, like the hippocampus, that's responsible for integrating, right, the unconscious into conscious memory, into something I can wake up tomorrow and say, hey, this happened. It gets stuck. It gets stuck in this unconscious implicit. And for those who have DID, dissociative identity disorder, oftentimes those parts, those pieces that take on the trauma, grow with the person. They have their own ages, their own names, their own hobbies and likes and dislikes. And most of them have a specific role. Like they were there to, to take on the pain, or they were there to get the schoolwork done, or they were there to make sure family was happy. Some of them are protective, so they all have a purpose and a place, but it's the way that our mind protects us during trauma. It is essential survival.
And so how common is it for someone to be diagnosed with DID or have DID?
Yeah, so the recent statistic is about 3.5% of the population. So it's not quite as rare as people have believed it to be. It's about as common as being a redhead. So,
oh, wow. And
yeah.
Is it more profound or more pronounced in people who have trauma early on, like in childhood, or what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, generally speaking, when we're talking about developmental trauma, DID occurs before the age of 9. So during those really pivotal developmental years where we're struggling with, obviously all those different stages, the pre-operational stage and all those things, the brain is trying to figure out who they are, like, who you are as a cohesive whole person. But when trauma happens early, it really messes that up. So it's not a linear progression. It's sort of like I get stuck in these little pockets and these little holes. So instead of coming out into adulthood, this one cohesive linear learning experience, I've come out into adulthood with 25 different pockets or holes and who have developed into their own personalities.
And does it matter the level of trauma or the complexity of the trauma? Can one-time trauma occur and trigger this beginning of DID, or is this chronic long-term trauma that someone attempts to cope with?
Typically speaking, we're talking about intense long-term trauma. But there are some studies that suggest, like, if there was like one extreme, say a medical event that happened to a child, that could elicit the beginning of a DID episode. And then once a fracturing happens, once it happens once, it's easier then for it to happen again and again and again and again, because then the brain is like, oh, this is an easy way to survive. This is the best way that we know to survive. So yeah.
Is there an average number of identities when someone has prolonged trauma and experiences DID?
Right now, I think it's like 12 to 35 is the average number of personalities. I know some who have upwards of 200 or 300. I'm not sure how they keep track, but I'm like, it's hard enough in the mid-teens, but yeah, typically, you're talking, 15 to 35-ish.
Because once the body learns that this is a coping mechanism, it's doomed to repeat.
Yes.
Highly likely to be repeatable. So what we see on television is that someone who has DID and they may lose time for a couple of days. They don't remember what happened under this other identity. Is that just television, or is that what really happened?
No, that's absolutely, it's called dissociative amnesia. And it absolutely happens. So there are some people, and there are some instances where what we're called co-conscious. So you've got two parts that are present at the same time. Usually one part is up front and sort of, driving the bus, so to speak. And then you might have other parts who are just sort of looking on from the background. But a lot of times, especially during, extreme traumatic phases, that these parts are very separated from the others, and they front. A lot of times all the others get pushed back. And then, if they're in control for 2 days and they went grocery shopping and they took the kids to school and all of these things, and then the host, or the one that occurs most naturally, comes back, they might have missed 2 or 3 days. It's very common to miss a few hours at a time, that's, and I know some people, even average people, do that, but, but not necessarily to the degree that those with DID do. It is odd to lose time. You're just not sure. And then it's sort of like a backtracking. Okay, what did I do? What did I say to who? Having conversations with people you don't remember having conversations with. And we're like, remember you said this? And we're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
And are there certain triggers that under certain level of stresses, or what makes one's identity change into another identity?
Absolutely. So I would point to the example. I should probably give the disclaimer, I have DID. So you probably already assumed that anyway, but so I'm just going to use myself as an example. Okay. But in a situation where it feels threatening, right? So if there's somebody yelling or screaming, or there's something going on, there will be a switch to a protective part, and that part will come on and take over to protect the whole system from, whatever might happen. So that's very common. Also, I know, like working with a therapist and that kind of thing, there are certain things that, if she's behaving in a way that's very motherly, then a lot of the littles will come out. So there are definitely triggers that bring out certain parts more than others.
And I would imagine when there's a safer environment, maybe that could be all the triggers. I would imagine don't have to be negative or stressful. Some could be very kind and loving. So how did you realize, or who diagnosed and what age, and, all the things, to share with us how you found out that you had DID?
Yeah. So a few years ago, after I started teaching on human trafficking, I would get to a part in my story, because I tell my, sort of my survivor story during these presentations to give some context to what we're talking about. And I am one who's always been very logical, very detail oriented. I'm like, it's got to be perfect. I have a list for everything. And completely not emotional. Like I just don't, I don't go there. A few years after starting to tell my story, I started to, in front of people, started to cry. And that was not me. I was like, this is not happening. I could tell my story, no problem. It was very rote and just how it was. So I sought out a counselor, because I was like, if anything, I just need some like tips and tricks, to kind of get me through the seminars without having a meltdown. So I didn't realize at the time that was relatively normal. So I found a therapist, and it took a while. I didn't really recognize it, but I have always, usually when I'm talking to other people, I've had to consciously now reprogram myself to say I and me instead of we and us and our, because that's been my vocabulary. So I went into the therapist's office saying we did this and we did, and she's like, who's we? Who's we, and then she asked me, she's like, can you start writing? Let's start journaling every day. Just, it doesn't matter what it is. Just, if you're having a good day, a bad day, or if you had cereal for breakfast, whatever it is, write it down. And began to discover pretty quickly, actually, that my handwriting and my, the tone of my journaling began to change. It was really interesting, just because it would go from very professional, cursive, beautiful writing, to this choppy block, had no idea how to spell, very basic. So it was like, what is going on? And discovered probably about a year and a half into therapy, she's like, I think we need to look at the dissociative, piece of this again. And I scored off the charts for dissociation and, so DID. So the DID was the official diagnosis because I had been missing time as well. And sometimes I would look in the mirror, I would have severe dysmorphia. I was like, that's not even close to who I am. I don't know what the heck's going on today. So,
Wow, that is so interesting. And I even read that can be physiological changes in a person's blood pressure or different physiological markers. So when people have DID, do they have male identities, female identities, child identities, adult identities?
Yeah, so it's different with everybody. With me, we're all girls, little to age 44, which is what I am. So I was diagnosed in my late 30s. But there are some I know in groups who have male, female, some are transgender, some are, they identify as all sorts of different genders, but also we have some that identify as animals or objects. I don't quite have my head wrapped around that because it's just not part of our system. But when you're in the magical phase of childhood and development, I can see how that transition would occur.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What is the goal, to unite the identities, or is that not the goal?
Again, it's different for everybody. For some of my parts, that is a very threatening kind of thing. They're like, if we become integrated and become whole or one or whatever, that means it's very fearful that they're going to just disappear and go away. So that's not our goal. Our goal is to actually integrate memory. So when we're sitting in a therapy session, there's a lot of obviously we're doing trauma work right now. So when those memories come up, or if I've got I've got a 10-year-old and she's experienced a lot of trauma, and she's talking about a certain experience. If I am co-conscious, right? If I've sort of there but not there, I can listen to the story and know the story, but I hadn't known the story before. So when we all start to get on the same page, okay, well, the 10-year-old experienced this and we all know it now. Okay, we can kind of integrate that memory from being stuck in the past to something that we can say, you know what, that happened a long time ago. It's not happening now. This is where we're at. Everybody's on the same page. And it's a very slow, rigorous process to get all the parts and memories together. But that's the goal.
That makes sense because you'll have to find out which identities know what, and then get those identities up to speed. How many identities do you have that you have learned about?
12 and counting. We've got some that we call like the lost ones. They're kind of just hiding in the background because it's a very scary thing. And we've got some who like to be up front. So it kind of shoves the other ones in the background. So we're kind of balance things out a little bit. But right now, 12 for sure.
And do they have names and everything to go with their identities?
Some of them do. Some of them I just, we call them by their age. So 6 and 11 is just because they're 6 and 11. Mimi is 4, and Mimi was, it was actually a nickname when I was little, but it was kind of a negative. It was called Screaming Mimi because I screamed all the time. But Mimi wouldn't let go of her name. So she was like, I'm Mimi. And some of them chose their names. One, my teenager, based on a book. So she's Audrina. But you know what? The professional is just the professional. It's just different for each one of them. But we try to encourage the names, so they do have a specific place and identity. It's not just lost in the mix.
So, if somebody wants to learn more about, DID, what are some recommendations that you might have?
I would first, if they want to learn more, honestly, The Body Keeps the Score, the book is, I know it's very popular. Bessel van der Kolk is amazing. But it really explains how the mind, the body, and the spirit are all connected. And dissociation is just part of that process to keep the person alive. And Dr. Daniel Siegel as well. He did a series called The Neurobiology of We, and it's amazing to just understand how trauma works and that kind of thing. So those are the two main recommendations I would give. So.
And when you finish with your PhD, is that your goal then to work with others that have DID? Is that what
The goal is to really develop programs that help survivors who have DID heal. That is the goal. I really want to make sure that we're integrating things that actually work. So I know a lot of the people talk about EMDR and that kind of thing, which is great for people who've experienced one kind of trauma, but inexperienced therapists who are doing EMDR with somebody who's got 20 different personalities is going to be a disaster. So we've got to make sure that we're applying the appropriate, a diagnosis, first of all, and then clinical treatment. So when it comes to DID, but the ultimate goal will be to make sure that people understand this is not some scary, weird, made up Hollywood kind of thing. Hollywood has made it scary. Like, we all have these weird demon parts running around killing therapists, and that's just not how it is. Yeah. So that's really the goal. And my sole purpose at this point is to do a study. And you had mentioned earlier the biological, the physiological changes that happen when parts come and go and that kind of thing. Well, we've noticed, even in myself, I wear a Fitbit during my therapy sessions, but we've noticed that there is a drastic drop in heart rate variability while these parts are present. So trying to, make sure that we connect all the appropriate pieces so that we understand better what DID is and how to treat it.
Now, why do you suspect the heart rate drops?
My resting heart rate is about 67-ish, 66. But during therapy sessions, when a little one comes out, it drops to about 54. So, and that's about my sleeping heart rate. So, it didn't really occur to me. I had read a couple of studies. It's called autonomic blunting. So when people dissociate, this autonomic blunting, it mirrors that freeze response that we have during survival. So that's sort of my area of study right now when it comes to, people with DID and the physiological impact that it has. So,
so very interesting. Yeah. And I think that your work is going to make an amazing difference, because I think a lot of people, including myself, don't know a lot about DID, and it's got to be involved in the survivor population just because of the chronic long-term trauma that a lot of them have experienced. Yeah. So we're so fortunate to have you studying this issue and moving forward on this issue so we can learn a lot more about it. And there is a lot of stigma around it. And so you mentioned a book. Are there any more documentaries, or do you do any presentations, or where can people learn even more about it?
Yeah, so people can reach me either through that website or the email address, because I do presentations on DID as well. There is a documentary on Amazon Prime that is the closest to reality that I've seen, and it's fairly recent, called The Many Sides of Jane. And she's a sort of like a Facebook friend kind of thing going on, but the documentary on her is much more realistic than anything I've seen. So, and they kind of follow her throughout her day, and they track her switches and things like that. So that I would recommend. Other than that, I mean, there's not a ton, of sort of easy to absorb information out there.
And so what kind of recommendations would you make in terms of treatment? You said EMDR would be a disaster. And yes. I want to ask you why that would be a disaster, first of all.
Yeah. EMDR, it generally, because you're working with one traumatic event kind of thing, right? So, but when you're in an EMDR session and you bring up one traumatic, you've got 20 different parts, and you've got 20 different parts wanting to say, or bring up what's happening. It could be completely overwhelming and re-traumatize the person. through all of these different events that are coming up at once. So that's why I say it's a very, it might be a quick release for somebody who's been through one or two traumas and really needs to move on. But for those who have endured developmental trauma through the formative years, you've got to sort of back it up, and go back to the foundation. First of all, safety, right? So a lot of times when we're talking about survivors, they never really got to that place, even in infancy, where they realized the world was a safe place. So creating safety is rule number one. I realize with the whole COVID thing, that has sort of broken down a little bit because it's hard to pick up on physical cues when you're virtual instead of face-to-face, sitting in an office with somebody. I'm very grateful my therapist never went, virtual. It would have destroyed a lot of work that we've been doing. But safety is number one. You've got to have a safe relationship with somebody to start bringing out all of those traumas. For me, when I'm at home and I'm not with my therapist, music and art and journaling. So those are my go-tos, because what we realize is those who've been through a lot of trauma, the two parts of their brain don't really communicate very well, right? That corpus callosum is kind of frayed a little bit. So for me, I lived a lot of my life on the left side with the logic and the language and the lists, so, and sometimes people live in their emotions. They live a lot on the other side. So we've got to find a way to bring a balance to the two. We've got to find a way to create a painting and say that felt like this. So now I can attach a feeling or an emotion with a word, with language. And yoga can be a part of that, any kind of physical activity. So, finding ways to make those connections is really important. But I found too, autobiographical journaling is very, very helpful, but I wouldn't recommend going through a healing journey without some sort of professional to go through it with you. So, yeah.
And so there's not really one type of methodology yet that we know of that someone can say, well, I can just use this methodology. It's sort of like moving a long time in a space that's safe with someone and sort of bringing those identities so that they can, I guess, respecting and appreciating and helping those identities to feel safe.
Right.
So yeah, I would imagine a very skilled therapist, a very skilled and caring and empathetic therapist would be wonderful. So, yeah. Well, Amy, anything you'd like to share with people who are advocates? They're trying to do their best. They're trying to work with survivors, and they're not clinical counselors. They're not clinical therapists, but what can they start to look for? Just enough where they can say, hey, maybe I need to get you to a therapist to have a full evaluation. This could be a possibility. What should they be looking for?
Yeah. So I would say like rapid mood changes, or what seems like rapid mood changes, when you're going from giddy laughter to crying, or, if someone seems very professional in one moment and just weeping the next. But also that dissociative amnesia that we talked about, if someone's like, I don't know where the time went, or, that person said that I met them like 2 days ago. I have no idea what they're talking about. Those are things that I would tend to look at. And I would tell those who are working with survivors, because I know a lot of like outreach survivors and things like that, they don't have the clinical background to sort of assess in the field, so I would recommend every survivor, right, get some professional, help. And not everybody with DID needs like a DID therapist. You just need a therapist who's willing to establish relationship, safety and connection, and willing to learn with you. Because a lot of, people with DID don't know they have DID until they're sitting there and they're 4 years old and they have no idea what the heck just happened. And a lot of therapists have no training in it because this is not something that's been out there or, taught in schools. So colleges. So those would be the things that I would definitely look for. And I would tell any professional out there too, one of the biggest things that I learned working with survivors is you plant the seed and it's up to them to do with it what they can and what they want to do with it. I think I spent a lot of years sort of beating myself up that I didn't that I couldn't do enough, that I couldn't do more, that I couldn't, but survivors have to participate in their own rescue. They have to participate in their healing. It's not something that we can do for them, but we plant the seed over and over and over again. And every time they come back, we're there for them again. But I think that's really important because burnout happens so fast.
I love that, Amy. And thank you so much for being you. And thank you for taking us on this journey with you. And I wish you so much luck and happiness. And I know that you are going to continue to have your footprint all over this issue and all across the US and hopefully around the globe. So thank you so much. And I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Wow. An amazing woman.
Definitely. I just think about my struggles and my problems and what stresses me out. And when you see someone that's suffered so much and to not only survive it, but thrive, that's truly amazing.
I know. I think about my problems too. And I know that I have been engaged in Trivia Pursuit because my problems can't even compare. But her life is so fulfilling. I mean, you're right. She's gone from surviving to thriving. I mean, she's a doctoral student and she will no doubt contribute really meaningful ways to the world when she's really focused on this DID as her topic. So I'm just so proud of her. I don't even know her really, but not really well, but I'm just so in awe of what she's been through and what she's been able to accomplish. It's like she talked about, parts of the brain sort of that gets cut off or parts of pieces that take on the trauma and grow with the person. And then they start to have their own ages and names and hobbies and likes and dislikes. And most of them have a specific role that they take on to take on the pain, or to get schoolwork done, or to make sure the family is happy. And so it's a lot of protection in a sense, like she described. Each identity has a purpose and has a place. And it's really a way of protecting against trauma. And she really describes it as essential, really, for some people to survive.
Yeah. And I noticed she said about 3.5% of the population has DID. That's not really a small percentage.
I know. And when you think of the fact that it's happening to a traumatized population, and our advocates listening work with traumatized populations. And so that's why DID is so important. It's an important field of study for survivors. It's important for advocates to understand, that can happen to people who experience extreme trauma or long-term chronic trauma.
Right. And I thought it was interesting. She even said her personalities had different handwritings, different tones when they spoke, and that they were likely to change into a different personality when she was in a threatening situation.
Right. That's so fascinating. And, and the thing that struck me, like, is the goal to integrate the personalities? And no, it's not. It's to integrate the memory so that each of the personalities has a consistent memory. And it's about creating safety and, establishing a safe relationship with your therapist. And she also mentioned doing a lot of music and art and journaling and ways that you can become functional and healthy and all those things. And then I really like that she talked about the EMDR, the eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is the up and coming thing. Like, that's the hit thing to, deal with trauma. And she says it would be an absolute disaster with somebody that has DID because you're focused on typically one traumatic event, where these folks have suffered chronic events often. And then you have 20 different, personalities. So that would just be, too overwhelming. So, Amy Joy fights for her health every single day. in ways that most people don't even understand. So someone said mental health needs more sunlight, more candor, more unashamed communication. And I think we got that today, and we need more of it.
Let's not just do something, let's do the best thing. If you like this episode of Emancipation Nation, please subscribe and I'll send you the weekly podcast. Until then, the fight continues.